What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Android Faithful, your weekly source for the latest news, hardware, apps and software and stuff, and interviews. You know, sometimes we have an interview episode, and today is one of those days, talking all about the world of Android and the world of Qualcomm. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Howell, joined by...
I'm Ron Richards, and it's always good.
Oh, yeah, you are?
I am, and it's always good to have a bonus episode, a little surprise on the feed for you when we've got a special opportunity to have a dedicated conversation with somebody in the mobile technology industry who one of the people behind the scenes who are making it happen. It just astounds me that there are so many talented people and so many really fascinating folks who are literally making the stuff we talk about week in and week out actually happen. And then it's so awesome that we actually get to talk to them and get insight into their business and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I just think it's so much fun. And so I hope everybody, when they listen to it, they appreciate that. So who are we talking to today, Jason?
Yeah, so, I would say most of, or many of you who are watching and listening probably either have a phone in your pocket right now that has Qualcomm silicon on it, or have at some point, right? So basically, you've had the work of Chris Patrick. He is in your pocket. He is Qualcomm's SVP and general manager of handsets. So he's kind of the guy coordinating all the handset side of Qualcomm, and he's been doing it for a very long time. He's a 30-year veteran of the company. The guy responsible for the Snapdragon chips inside most of these phones that we're talking about regularly on this show every week. And we got the chance to sit down with him for close to 40 minutes to kind of ask him some really, I thought we chose some pretty solid questions that go beyond just like, tell us what Qualcomm does. Like, we dive a little bit into RAMageddon and kind of the competition side of things, and
AI,
cover a lot of ground.
Of course, AI, and kind of, and their partnership with Samsung and just all, and some really interesting stuff. And you I think you positioned it really well, Jason. I think everyone who listens to this podcast has interacted with Qualcomm's technology at some point in your life, whether you knew it or not. Qualcomm has been so ubiquitous in this industry, and it's really there's really no way around it. They've been such a titan in terms of the system on a chip architecture and powering so many phones, both on the upper, high end flagship side, but also on the mid and lower mid range and lower end. And it's really kind of, when you think about the impact that they have on the industry and somebody like Chris's, impact within Qualcomm, it's great to hear his point of view on a lot of these topics, and the RAMageddon topic alone was just really insightful to hear how they're approaching it and what their take on it is. And it's, it's somewhat relieving to hear that it's not doom and gloom, right?
Yeah, indeed. Well, there's a lot of ground to cover, and so we're just going to get right to it. Definitely, sit back, relax, and enjoy this chat with Chris Patrick from Qualcomm. All right, really happy to welcome Chris Patrick from Qualcomm to the show. Chris, it's a pleasure having you on today. Thank you.
Hey, great to talk to both of you guys. Nice seeing you, Ron. Nice seeing you, Jason.
Yes, welcome.
Qualcomm, legendary in the Android space. Ron and I have been doing Android shows since the beginning, since like 2011. So almost the beginning, maybe a little bit after the beginning. But I feel like the Qualcomm thread has been there the entire time. You're like our comfort pillow.
I will share that my very first cell phone, not just smartphone, but cell phone, my last year of college was a Qualcomm, late 90s. It was like a long candy bar Qualcomm phone with like 3 lines of pixel stuff. I forget the model number. It was from Verizon. It was like a long black phone, and it kind of bulged out for the earpiece and had a pull-out antenna.
Yeah.
And I was able to program it to get MSN to send me the Mets final baseball scores via text message, and all my friends thought I was crazy. But I was there at Qualcomm back in the day in 1999. So yeah.
Okay. We appreciate your long-time patronage, Ron. That's very good. Yeah, no, Qualcomm's been doing this a long time. And so I've actually been with the company 30 years.
Wow.
I started with the company when I was 7, just to be clear.
Nice.
So
in the mailroom, right?
Time. Yeah, exactly. Sure. So yeah, we've been doing this a long time, and we've seen transformation of the transformation in the cell phone industry. So and amazing. You don't have to go to a different industry. This industry reinvents itself kind of every few years. So it's fantastic.
It really does. Before we kind of get into the questions du jour, what phone does the person who is kind of commanding mobile at a company like Qualcomm have in his pocket right now?
Okay, right now I have a Samsung Galaxy Fold 7. And so that's what I use.
Nice foldable guy. I like it.
I'm a foldable guy. I like a nice big screen. Not because my eyes are getting older, just to be clear.
Definitely not.
I once you get the real estate, it's hard to walk away from the real estate. So presentations and things, maybe a movie every once in a while on the big screen for me is very compelling. So very hard to move away from the fold.
And you gotta enjoy the product of which you work so closely with.
Exactly.
If Ron and I were talking before the show, we were like, wouldn't it be weird if we asked him that question and he said an iPhone? Because like working at a company like Qualcomm for 30 years, like I'd have been really surprised. I ain't gonna lie. So I'm happy to hear that.
We have detectors at the door, so you bring in the wrong phone, we know. There's a few people we have still doing competitive analysis, but
you gotta know what's going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the rest of us very committed to Android. Android's our heart.
Well, so, and it's interesting because, we're, being at Qualcomm for so long and being there all the way back to the CDMA days, and the fact that the first Snapdragon Samsung collaboration was actually the Anycall SCH 100 in that era, such a wide, it's a lifetime, multiple lifetimes of phones and technologies and things like that. And when you're holding that Galaxy Fold in your hand and you think about all of the phones that have crossed your desk in all of those years, what part of it, if you try to think back to when you first started at Qualcomm, what part of what you're doing today do you think would have seemed impossible to you back in those early days? It might be the fact that the phone folds and it can fold and go in your pocket, but what have you guys done?
There were foldable phones.
There were foldables. Yeah,
they were different.
They didn't have a screen that folded. But we had hinges. We did invent hinges a long time ago, so that's true.
There you go.
All of it. I mean, really, all of it. I mean, what we're all doing, I think, is amazing. Qualcomm has always been a fun place because we have like these long-term kind of researchers, right, who are thinking, all right, in 10 years from now, what is the crazy thing that could happen on a phone or a mobile device or a PC or a data center? So that we have that, and then we have these people working on trying to take those visions that may be 10 years away and make it possible. So you look at kind of cellular technology, kind of original 1G technologies to 2G and to 5G. Some of those ideas are very old, 20 years old, but they're impossible, right? They're not something you could do in a device that fits in your pocket. You could do it in a device that sort of fills up a conference room or something. So how do we take all this incredible amount of processing and compact it into these tiny, tiny devices with little batteries that fit in your pocket? Every gen, these things that start off as impossible, become almost impossible, and then kind of possible, and then suddenly we're able to deliver it to hundreds of millions of consumers across the world. So it's a pretty fascinating industry, nonstop. So right now, obviously, AI is kind of what we're all thinking about, but there's so many vectors. I mean, gaming, right? Again, what we can do on this tiny phone that is in your pocket is just inconceivable. I mean, I could not have explained any of this, I think, to myself 20 years ago when I was 8. Impossible, I think, to kind of explain what we can do now. Ray tracing and just unbelievable resolutions, and you talked about your 3 lines of pixels that we were proud of from back in the day, and it's true. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, you mentioned AI. I mean, clearly, this is the story of technology of the past couple of years, and definitely in 2026. Your CEO, Cristiano Amon, says AI becomes the new UI and apps fade into the background. This is definitely a topic that we have talked about a lot on Android Faithful. I've talked about it on my other show, AI Inside, which is this idea that like as these AI systems become more embedded into smartphones, and the agents are capable of doing all these things, like what happens to the smartphone in a world where we're used to it being us driving the apps, and now these things are kind of managing things behind the scenes. So from your perspective, from Qualcomm's perspective, what does a phone look like in a couple of years if Aman is right about this? And how does that influence like how you work with that reality?
Right. Again, it's the same idea, is like something simple like voice recognition. Right. Now, again, we've been working on voice recognition for 25 years. I can just remember us going to meetings and discussing, again, how could we detect these very simple keywords and kind of do an okay job. So you extrapolate that to kind of today, to natural language processing, to be able to have a conversation with your device and poorly express your intent with a lot of ambiguity, and have enough local processing that your device can take all of that and then figure out what you really meant, and then translate that into concrete actions, and then take those actions on your behalf. Like, amazing. I think that what we can all do as an industry and as an ecosystem. But yeah, now, so what does it mean? I think when we say the app moves into the background, to me, it's the same idea. Is if your phone can be smart enough, if we can have enough local processing on the device, if we can have enough intelligence distributed between the device and the cloud, then yeah, you don't need to do the step. Just like you didn't need to maybe do the step of going in your dialer and picking up a person and selecting the contact. Instead, you can just say, call person X. So now it's the same kind of idea. Instead of having to go to the app and scroll and press the thing and press the settings and go to the submenu, instead of that, you can express your intent. And there's enough processing in the device, enough processing in the system to take that intent and translate it in a low error rate way, which is very key, into what you really meant, right? Present the right UI back to you so you can opt in at the right times, and then can go execute, the vision that you had. So I think, there's the difference between having kind of a brand new engineer out of school that doesn't know anything yet and is kind of just needs step-by-step instructions, to having like a seasoned engineer, a seasoned person working on your team, who you can say, look, I don't know exactly what I need, but I need a presentation for the boss, and it needs to kind of look like this. Right? It takes a lot of expertise, it takes intelligence, it takes processing to go from the junior engineer to the senior engineer. And so that's what we're all trying to build here, is these mobile devices that are going from the brand new junior student to somebody that really is experienced and polished and has the judgment to take actions on your behalf. So yeah, so very, very interesting to see how this all works, right? It's going to be a fun ride.
It's interesting because, all that kind of reminds me of at the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 launch, you actually described AI agents that, quote, you said they see what you see, hear what you hear, and think with you in real time. But that was last year, right? So today, here we are in this year. How can you tell us how and where is that actually showing up? And we, Jason and I and our other co-hosts on Android Faithful, we've been drowning in examples from Google and other app makers and other the people building these AI tools. And then every time we see Gemini or Galaxy AI do something impressive and we're kind of wowed by it, how much of that is actually running on your NPU?
Sure. Yeah, so we think of this agentic flow almost as sort of 3 steps. Not 100% right, in that everything is actually more intermingled than it sounds. But we think of kind of perception, which is how do you get context? How do you figure out what's kind of going on? Right. Then there's reasoning, and then finally there's action. So each of these 3 is actually really distributed in the end between the edge and the cloud to some extent. But yeah, the edge, the devices that we build, at on the mobile devices that my team builds on the edge, have a super important role to play kind of in each of these. So you start first with kind of perception. So that's understanding the voice. You speak to it. For example, you speak to your phone. But the example you said is see what I see, hear what I hear. So hear what I hear is, for example, if I wanted to use my phone to record this conversation, provide me context for later on, set up an action item, I need to follow up with Ron. I need to book that lunch at Hodad's that we were discussing just earlier.
Nice callback.
I wouldn't forget it. I certainly wouldn't forget it.
Anyway, so if we want to go do that, I need my phone needs to be smart, right? It needs to be perceiving what's going on around me and provide that for the next steps. So then I need reasoning, like what does it mean to book a lunch at Hodad's? I don't think Hodad's takes reservations, but what does that mean? Maybe I need to carve out time on my calendar. How do I translate that kind of high level action into actually some steps. And then I actually have to go actions that actually has to go block off on my calendar. Maybe that's a different calendar app. Maybe it's a Google Calendar app. Maybe it's something else. But that has to be done on my phone because maybe it's a different system. So anyway, so I'm saying is there's this kind of complex flow, each of these steps. And each of these steps, I think we're less now thinking about, well, yeah, which of these is purely running on the edge? Which of these is running on the cloud? And it's really what is the right low friction path to kind of get the task done. So in general, a lot of the perception kind of piece, people are doing on the device, on the edge. Reasoning is sort of distributed, and then increasingly actions are happening on the edge. And so that needs maybe screen understanding. If you're doing something like scripting an app, that might need other kinds of techniques that end up getting done locally. But we're kind of most kind of focused at the moment on how do we enable these great experiences, kind of wherever the processing runs.
Yeah, wherever the processing runs and whatever kind of device it happens to be on. Samsung just, you've got a foldable in your pocket. Samsung just confirmed that its kind of next lineup of foldables, which we're all expecting, them to announce at their event on July 22nd. No surprise, that event is happening. But they announced that that lineup, or at least part of that lineup, is going to run on Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 for Galaxy. And I know that this is in advance of the event. It's a couple of days from now. You can't talk about their products, but kind of about yours and from your perspective, from Qualcomm's perspective, what is a chip that you're creating have to do differently on a device that's like that, like thin, it folds, runs in two very different screen states? Like what is a Qualcomm processor that is designed for that device, for Galaxy, doing different from other processors that you create for maybe more, more generic form factors, let's say? Sure.
Yeah, so we very proud. We have the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. So that is that's our main flagship, right? That's the top of the line in the industry, really defining the mobile industry, the cadence of the mobile industry is this launch every year of our new 8 device. So this year it's the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, launched in the fall, first in the fall last year. So we work very closely with Samsung. Nothing that we can announce today, I think, on those foldable devices. But we're always optimistic. I think that we're going to have a big presence in their portfolio. I think for those foldable devices, incredible set of devices, but it's very challenging to make a foldable. Again, we couldn't have conceived it 30 years ago, a device as elegant and incredible as this. But it has some unique challenges, the foldables. So, for example, power consumption. So now you have a very different battery system. You actually often have multiple batteries, one on each side of the fold. Just managing a battery kind of that's distributed in this way is actually much more complicated than it sounds. The device tends to be thinner. So we have these incredibly thin single kind of candy bar phones, but then you take these foldable phones and the goals are to be just as thin as those devices, but then splits. So now it's a very thin device. And so we have to be very careful with thermal. With all the incredible processing that we're doing in a phone like that, we want to make sure that there's not heat presented to the user, to the hands. So that means we have to be incredible at power consumption. That means the gaming experiences and video experiences and camera experiences that we all love on our phones, AI experiences, have to be done in a way that are incredibly power efficient to manage heat within a device like that. We have to do all this in a very small form factor because, again, the real estate is occupied now, very thin, is occupied by battery, etc. So we have to take all these components. Our chipset from Qualcomm is 40 plus different components. All has to be compacted into a very small area to enable these incredible form factors. And then with Samsung, we have a very deep partnership across things like display and camera and things that are unique to kind of the Samsung brand, the Samsung look and feel. So we're always proud of the partnerships we have with that team.
Well,
picking up on the partnership side of things, we're at a unique moment in time because we're on the eve of Samsung. They're going to go over to London and make a pretty big show next week at Galaxy Unpacked. And it sounds like Snapdragon is going to touch on a lot of things that are happening there. We understand, we're not looking for any scoops. You're not going to reveal anything and step on your partner's toes there. But,
unless you want to.
Yeah, feel free to give us some breaking news.
Is this recorded, by the way? I hope.
No, we're not recording right now. This is all.
Totally accept that.
But we'd love it if you could kind of give us a little behind the curtain or a little, kind of insight into how deep that partnership goes right now. Because we know Samsung is such a big company and is doing so much, both with their own chips and with their own development, as well as partnering with you guys and creating so many devices. I mean, I feel like every week on the show we're covering a new device that Samsung is doing, and they're out there. But you guys seem to be so working so closely with them, and so I just love to see love to hear about what that partnership is like. And then as we're looking towards next week, kind of what should Android fans be watching for next week as they tune into Galaxy Unpacked without revealing anything?
Sense.
Yeah, in a general sense. What should we be excited about? Obviously,
sure.
Just in general. So
yeah. Again, our partnership with Samsung very long. So our pioneering kind of technology on the mobile side was called CDMA. So very innovative, a whole different way of doing kind of cellular technology than had been done before. So our first launches of that actually were in Korea. Very first launches in Korea, and Samsung is one of those lead partners. So very, very long partnership. One of the things we realized as we moved to the smartphone era, and honestly, and then maybe the even more innovative smartphone era, say of the last 10 years, where the devices became, in my mind, kind of extraordinary, is it was not possible really to innovate if we designed a chip and then somebody else took that and said, okay, great chip, thank you, and now I'm going to go design a phone. Like what we found is we just couldn't. That limited us too much in terms of the innovation cycle. And so the only way really to build these extraordinary devices I think we have today is to get closer with our customers, closer with our partners, and almost co-design the vision for what we wanted to build together. So a modern semiconductor, modern platform like the 8 Elite Gen 5 and what we'll have in the future really is almost a 3-year exercise. So it's not a matter of, it just doesn't work if what we do is we come up with our best cool idea and then independently the phone designer comes up with his own idea at the end, and that's not enough. Where the innovation has to be much longer. So that's what we have with Samsung. It's a very long innovation cycle where we're discussing, today, what should we do together in 2029. And that's what's necessary, really, to deliver incredible experiences. That's no guarantee. I think Samsung will end up using kind of our platform in 2029. But I think we have to be optimistic and go into these partnerships with that kind of vision, that kind of approach. Otherwise, the innovation cycle gets too slow. So that's how we work with those guys. I think what we can expect, in their launch in July, I'm looking forward to finding out. So I think it's going to be cool. I think there's excitement in the industry about form factors. They dropped a couple hints that I don't know anything, but I'm interested to see if the form factor is going to evolve. I think they're going to share a lot. I would guess on kind of new AI use cases, new agentic use cases that are going to be pretty interesting. So I'm looking forward to the show.
Are you going to London to be there in person, or are you going to watch it?
I'm going to London. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there in person.
Jealous. I wanted to go, but I can't make the trip. But I love London. So
London's fantastic.
We'll have a good time. So
thank you.
Well, you're talking about different form factors, and we're not going to get into Samsung specific form factors, but it does kind of remind me of other kind of tangentially related mobile form factors. You say Qualcomm recently released or announced Reality Elite, the START program at AWE last month. We've got Android XR glasses coming, sometime this fall or this year. We know Google's got theirs, and we've heard about Samsung possibly having some. Qualcomm, you're clearly building the chips for whatever might actually replace smartphones or at least augment them. Maybe that's the safer way to put it. And clearly, I realize you run handsets, so maybe your direct work doesn't work specifically with these other types of form factors. But I'm curious, from your perspective, working with handsets as closely as you have for so long, I'm curious about how you see these kind of wearable form factors. Do you see them as accessories? Do you see them as a successor? Like, what does that look like from like Qualcomm handset perspective? It's an interesting time right now. Yeah. The smartphone has reigned supreme for a very long time, and now these other things are kind of come along. It's like, are we looking at the next thing, or are we just looking at like a thing that I can tap into the thing I'm already using?
Sure. Long live the king. That's what I say. But no. So I think the smartphone is going to be very important to all of us for a long time. That's kind of my intuition. But yeah, I think it's kind of monopoly maybe changes, right? So I view more augmentation model than a replacement model, which is So for example, I go every few weeks I go visit customers kind of across the globe. Sometimes I need on-device translation, or I need translation kind of services, right? So the phone is almost a great device for that, but not perfect. You have big, boomy conference rooms and things like that. I almost need a better device to help capture that. So maybe that's a smart glass, maybe that's a puck that I'm going to put on the table, or something that can do a better job of kind of capturing directional audio and bring it to me, directional video, directional kind of camera capability, and then feeding that into the phone, or maybe an independent complex of devices, and providing that other stream. If we go back to what I talked about at the beginning earlier about perception, reasoning, and then kind of action, the question is, can we expand the perception sensors kind of around the user to make in the end these agentic experiences even more compelling? So can I add heart rate, right? So my phone knows that I'm very nervous because you guys are tough interviewers. My watch can check my heart rate and kind of provide that feedback, maybe tell me to calm down. I can use the camera in my glasses to understand who I'm speaking to. I can get directional audio this way as opposed to just kind of broadcast. Anyway, I think all these things together, kind of a constellation of devices, we think are going to drive this very compelling set of user experiences. In the end, maybe the phone becomes more optional. Maybe I leave that behind sometimes, and I have an incredible watch. I have incredible glasses. I have other kind of peripherals around me that together can be the same set of experiences. But I do think the phone is going to be a pretty important part of that constellation. Just I think having a display, having big battery, I think is going to be very important.
One topic that's been a hot topic these past couple of months with a lot of our audience, I think everybody's feeling it, but the fact that phone prices are on the rise, particularly driven by the cost of chips and the cost of RAM. We're calling it RAMageddon.
RAMageddon.
That's what we've been calling it.
Yeah,
exactly. RAMageddon's caused flagship pricing to go up sharply. Foldables are pushing well past the $2,000 mark. And even, your own handset revenue dipped last quarter, partly because OEMs pulled back because of RAMageddon. So we're curious kind of what is the RAMageddon perspective like from your seat? How are you guys affected by it? What are your conversations around it? What is, as you guys look at the landscape, is it the cause of the end times, or is there a light at the end of the tunnel, or what can, I know nobody can predict the future, but what is the temperature in and around these rising costs that we're dealing with?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with this, but maybe just to give a perspective for a second. Yeah, so what's happening across the entire industry really is the data center, AI data center in particular, demand just continues to skyrocket as we all use these new tools, right? I think it's an exciting time for humankind, but supply chain is a slow thing to respond. right? So supply chain needs we talked about 3 years to build a mobile platform, much longer, right? To build these supply chains on things like memories and ultimately advanced semiconductor. So yeah, the challenge the whole industry is going through is, there's excess demand and insufficient supply. So that means that memory pricing in particular to consumer electronics, just because so much of that is shared, that supply chain is shared between that and the memories that go into data centers, prices going up in an extraordinary way. And to some extent, the same on advanced semiconductor, which is what ultimately feeds our product lines. So yeah, very challenging, I think, for the mobile industry in particular, just because there's so much of that content in a mobile phone. So difficult time, I think, for the industry. It's difficult. I think inevitably our customers have to pass on those. There's no other option. Have to pass on some of those costs to the end customer, and so the end customer sees a sharply increasing price for kind of similar product, which is never a good feeling. Right, so I think it is a temporarily kind of a difficult time, I think, for the industry. But yeah, what it does, I think it puts even more pressure on all of us to innovate even faster, to produce even more exciting user experiences that are less dependent on, for example, big chunks of RAM. So for example, one of the things that we're working on, that Google's working on, each of our customers is working on, is trying to provide similar sets of user experiences without 16 gigabytes of RAM, for example. Right. So in the end, it was when RAM was cheap. I mean, that was kind of an easy solution to some of the engineering problems. But I think with more sophisticated software engineering, more sophisticated kind of system design, we can take that same experience and fit it into 12 gigabytes of RAM, or maybe not exactly, but maybe 8 gigabytes of RAM. So for example, AI. So AI is something very data heavy. The same reason it's data heavy in the data center, it can be RAM storage heavy on the edge as well. So one of the things that Qualcomm has been leading is on model compression. So rather than take a model that is floating point and is maybe 16 bits per what's called parameter, which is one of the elements of these large models, can we get the equivalent performance with integer, which takes less space? Can we take that integer and go from 8 bits to 4 bits? Can we go 4 bits to 2 bits? Anyway, so these are some of the technologies we're working on, which is, can we get equivalent processing to what would have been a very large footprint model, kind of AI footprint, and then instead, can we get that done in something that's much smaller? So anyway, so that's what, every time in the industry we have challenges, and then I think we respond with innovation. And so that's what we're doing. That's what some of our partners are doing, is innovating our way kind of through this moment. Yeah. So challenging time, but yeah, challenging times are when we grow stronger. So it's good.
Yeah, indeed. You certainly learn a lot, and sometimes that kind of forces innovation in a different direction than the comfort of the other side of that would have led you to, and you never know. And speak kind of along those lines, one of the things, the recurring topics on the show has been this analysis of the bottom of the market, the kind of the lower end of the market, let's say, where you've got the memory crunch, you got these devices, let's say sub $100 or $150 or whatever, these really inexpensive devices. And I know that Qualcomm, you sell Snapdragon 4, Snapdragon 6 series into that segment, but this is a category of the market that is just has the potential to be really reduced in numbers in a large number of ways because of this price crunch. I'm curious, what happens to that entry-level Android segment specifically, and in Qualcomm's mind, is that redesigning chips in a different way to satisfy those lower end devices so that they can still enjoy some of the, even some of the features that some of the more expensive phones get, like those AI features, or maybe those features go away entirely. But how does Qualcomm attack the challenge of those lower end devices and what they're going to inevitably see over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's going to be even more interesting, I think, at that end. I think, as you said, is if you look at the raw cost of a phone, right, especially at the bottom end, the memory now is a very large percentage. So if the memory price cost doubles, triples, quadruples, goes up by a factor of 10, which is almost the range I think we're discussing now. A big impact on that phone at the lower end. Mm-hmm. But again, the consequences of it are actually are very interesting. So I think what a lot of customers are coming to us with, which is, hey, the phone there's a lot of people that wanted to buy that phone for, say, $100, to your example. Now, if the memory costs most of $100, that price point is not available. But they know the users that they must have a phone, right? It's that phone is going to be how they access the finance system. That's how they run their micro business. That's how they live their lives. That's how they're connected to each other. So we have to provide a phone to that end user. And the question now is, what is the phone composition now that it has some of the components in the phone are more expensive? So actually, what some OEMs are coming to us to ask is, actually, we want more, not less capability. We want, instead of using what we call a 400 series, our lowest device, instead we want a 600 series device for that segment of the market, just because if the consumer has to pay for this kind of relatively expensive memory, they want to make sure there's an SoC and a platform that is capable of kind of supporting the value of that price point device. Anyway, so a lot of implications here, but in the end, Qualcomm we've been doing this a long time, and I think the mobile phone has never been more important to people. It's never been more important to kind of the world, and it's never been less or more indispensable. So, yeah, we stay in the end. I think there's going to be temporary shifts, but in the end, people will want to and will need to invest in phones, really, to kind of get access to their digital lives and be members of society. So yeah, so it's our job, I think, to work on how do we get the memory footprint down to help our customers, and now to kind of retune for this new reality. What are the features really that are going to add enough value to make that user now comfortable with that investment? So anyway, we're thinking about both ends of the market here. Kind of how do we do incredible experiences at the top, and then how do we provide the most valuable experiences at the lower end of the range?
And that's really interesting, Chris, because that also makes me think of, because there's like another angle to it, because you got the high end, you got the low end, but then over off to the side, you got a lot of partners and some of your biggest customers and the OEMs that are also building their own chips. Right, you got Google with the Tensor, you got Samsung with Exynos, you got Xiaomi with X-Ring, and if these OEMs are doing custom silicon, also, what are you guys doing to make sure that Snapdragon remains indispensable to them in the long term as well? Like, obviously innovation, thinking about that, and then having, the top and the bottom covered in terms of market share. But, how does, at the same time you're partnering with them, but also competing with them? Like, how do you guys navigate in those relationships? And then how do you use that to guide your long-term strategic planning around innovation?
Sure. Yeah, actually, so the fun thing is, this is actually not unusual for Qualcomm, and maybe in many industries not unusual. So for most of our existence, really, is some of our key customers have had their own chip as well. So we have a pretty unique advantage, we feel, over kind of that in-house SoC, just because we're serving so much of the industry. Our focus is to be this horizontal player and try to aggregate requirements across a lot of different people, invest across really the entire industry. So that gives us, I think, a lot of strength versus kind of an in-house SoC that's focused just on kind of a smaller segment of the market. But again, we always welcome the competition. This industry is absolutely too big, I think, for just one player. And so, yeah, if we have multiple players and multiple ideas, I think it drives innovation. It drives kind of this happy experiments where we can all learn from each other and move forward together. So to me, it's kind of like Android is, do we want one phone or do we want lots of different phones, all kinds of different form factors and experimentation? So yeah, it doesn't change our approach fundamentally. We're still going to run and jump and innovate as fast as we can. It does provide some interesting conversations. So sometimes it's unusual. But yeah, what you find in this industry is there's so many big players that there's never one relationship, right? It's always you buy this from me and I sell this to you, and then I compete with you here, but we partner here, but we're healthy, respectful opponents in this segment. So, yeah, we all manage and we all, in the end, work together respectfully.
Great.
Awesome. I know we're running up against the time that we have with you, but real quick, before we kind of move on and end things so you can get to your busy day, Snapdragon Summit just a couple of months away. Got it happening in September in Maui. And of course there is, buzz that's kind of building around Gen 6 and what we might see there. And again, without spoiling anything, you certainly don't have to say anything you aren't allowed to, unless you feel like you want to, then we will welcome that. But what's the general theme of Qualcomm as we kind of, reach the latter half of 2026? And that might give us some indication as far as what we expect at the summit.
We have, we're going to have a lot to share. It's going to be pretty exciting. So I hope, who's going to be with us? Are you guys both going to be with us? Okay. All right.
I know I will be there. I think.
Okay.
And I'm not jealous of that fact at all. As I'm sitting here in the New York Indian summer heat.
Listen, Maui's not that great. It's just one of the most beautiful places on the earth. But don't worry about it, Ron. So we have a lot. We have a lot to share. I think a lot of we have technology innovations across the board. We love gaming. Kind of mobile gaming, super important to us, and super important to so many of our users across the globe. I think we're always kind of moving the bar forward on gaming. On gaming, but on the core processors. You're gonna hear maybe a lot about AI and about kind of new leaps forward on some of the those pillars we just talked about. So perception, reasoning, and then actions. So some big innovations there. Camera, you can't go to a Qualcomm event without hearing about new kind of visual experiences that we can enable. Maybe some new hints on some form factors. So we'd love for everybody to tune in and to join us if possible.
Amazing.
I'll be watching along at home.
Okay.
And I'll be working on my tan. Hey, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on and talking with us about everything that Qualcomm is up to. Like I said, there are times we've been doing this show for so long that sometimes companies feel like celebrities simply because we've had Qualcomm in the conversation with us for so many years at this point. So it is really cool to be able to pull back the curtain and to kind of see how does this work behind the scenes, because so many of our listeners, so many of the fans of this show guaranteed they have a phone in their pocket that's running your silicon. And so I hope that they find this useful, and I really appreciate your time. This has been really interesting and helpful.
Insightful, really great.
Okay.
Yeah, sir.
Very interesting for me as well, guys. So very much appreciate it. So thanks for your time.
Enjoy London. Have a good time at Samsung. Have a great time in Hawaii. Again, I'm not jealous of either trip, but we appreciate having you on, and keep doing the great work. We really appreciate it. So
okay, all right, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Boom. There you go. I gotta say, Chris, he's a cool dude.
Very cool.
He was fun to talk to. Sometimes you have interviews and, that was a good interview, but not only was that a good interview, but he was cool to hang out with,
Solid.
I want to hang out with him.
hey, listen, when you work in mobile technology and you're based in San Diego, it's kind of hard not to be to have a cool disposition about it. But,
that's true.
But hey, you'll get to hang out with them in Hawaii when you go to the Snapdragon Summit. I'm not jealous.
Cover the summit. Yeah, I'll be covering the summit for Android Faithful. So, we'll have coverage on the
Someone's got to go, I guess. Fine. You're closer.
I guess I gotta.
Yeah.
I guess I have to, Ron. Yeah. Fine. If I have to go to the sun, I will.
These are the things we do for the show. But but huge thanks to Chris Patrick and to all the folks at Qualcomm and helping set this up. We really appreciate the time. And this is a great little preview ahead of Samsung Galaxy Unpacked next week.
Yes.
We'll be covering that. Looking at the calendar, that's actually happening. We got to figure out how we're covering that, but we're gonna, because that happens on a Wednesday, not on a Tuesday. So we'll figure that out. But lots going on over the next month between Samsung and then made by Google and all that fun stuff. It's gonna be a busy time here at Android Faithful. So we thank everybody for listening. So
isn't it always a busy time? Feels like it anyways. Yeah. We do our normal episodes every Tuesday evening. Interview episodes like this just kind of bust in when they feel like it, and so in this case, it's a little off schedule, but you can definitely expect our episodes sometime next week, be it either Tuesday or Wednesday after the Samsung event. We'll figure it out. We'll let you know on the socials. So, find Ron or me or any of the other hosts on the socials to get details on that. AndroidFaithful.com, Patreon.com/AndroidFaithful if you want to support us and make sure that we can both go to Maui someday. We won't stop you. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.